It began with a single creak in Buckingham's east corridor, one sound that shattered decades of silence. King Charles paused, his hand resting against a narrow, dust-coated door half buried behind an old tapestry. What lay beyond wasn't just a room. It was a secret Camilla had guarded since before their marriage. Letters, photographs, a locked box marked for his eyes never. When Charles opened it, forgiveness died quietly in that dim light. What he found inside didn't just change his heart, it threatened to change the monarchy forever. Before we step through that hidden door together, make sure you've subscribed and turned on the bell icon. These royal walls have secrets no documentary dares to tell, and you won't want to miss the next revelation. Hit like if royal mysteries fascinate you. Share this video with someone who's ever wondered how much truth really hides behind the palace smiles. It was a quiet morning inside. Buckingham Palace too, quiet for the royal corridors that usually hummed with the footsteps of staff, advisors, and guards. The chandeliers above glimmered faintly in the filtered winter light, throwing pale reflections across the marble floors. King Charles walked alone. His pace was slow, deliberate. There was no entourage, no Camilla beside him. Just the echo of his shoes against the centuries-old floor. He had come here on impulse, guided by something he couldn't name, a restless thought that had kept him awake the entire night. Something in this wing of the palace had changed. For most of his reign, the east corridor remained sealed off, reserved for preservation work and historical maintenance. But today, as Charles passed through, a flicker in the corner of his eye made him stop. The old tapestry of King George VI's coronation was uneven, just slightly. He stepped closer. When he touched the edge of the fabric, the air behind it felt different, colder, almost alive with stillness. And there it was, a faint outline of a door, narrow and disguised within the wall panels. Charles hesitated. He glanced around. No one? Strange, he whispered. I thought this section was mapped completely. He ran his hand over the wood. The surface was cool, the hinges hidden behind layers of decorative plaster. But one corner bore a tiny, almost invisible scratch, like someone had tried to open it recently. Then came the sound. Faint click. It wasn't his imagination. The door shifted ever so slightly. Charles's heart pounded not from fear, but from the kind of curiosity that only comes once you realize you've stumbled onto something meant to stay buried. He leaned closer, pressing his ear to the wood. Nothing. Just silence and dust. No, but silence in a palace like Buckingham could be louder than thunder. Your Majesty, Charles? Turned sharply. It was David Langford, the captain of the Royal Guard, tall, composed, wearing his crimson uniform like a second skin. Everything all right, sir? Langford asked, glancing past him. Charles straightened. I thought I heard something. Langford frowned, stepping closer. That section leads to the older servants' quarters, I believe. Been closed for decades. Decades, Charles murmured. His fingers brushed the edge again. And yet, someone's been here. Langford's posture stiffened. Should I call for the restoration team? No, Charles said firmly. Not yet. I'd rather see what's behind it myself. Langford hesitated. He was trained to follow orders, but even royal curiosity had limits. Your Majesty, with respect, these old sections can be unsafe. I'll take that risk, Charles interrupted quietly. He pressed against the door again. This time, the latch gave way with a brittle snap. The wood groaned as it opened, the hinges creaking like an old man's sigh. A waft of stale air rushed out, carrying a scent of dust, paper, and lavender. A narrow stairway descended into dim light. Langford stepped forward. Allow me first, sir, but Charles shook his head. If someone built a room here, I need to see it with my own eyes. He lifted a small flashlight from the wall mount and began his descent. Each step felt heavier than the last, not from weight, but from history pressing down on him. At the bottom, the staircase opened into a small chamber. The ceiling was low, the walls lined with faded wallpaper patterned with roses. There was a writing desk, a mirror, a single armchair, and on the desk, a framed photograph. Charles picked it up, hand froze. It was a picture of Camilla. Younger, smiling, her hair tied back, seated beside a man Charles did not recognize. His uniform bore insignias of the Royal Guard. Langford came closer, his face unreadable. Do you know who that is? Charles asked. Langford squinted. Looks like Lieutenant Robert Haynes, sir. He served before my time, but he was dismissed under unclear circumstances. Dismissed, Charles repeated, his voice low, or hidden. He set the photo down and turned his gaze to the corner of the room. The chest sat beneath a sheet of white fabric. Dust coated its edges, but the lock had been recently forced. He knelt, lifted the light. Inside were letters. Dozens of them, bound in ribbon, all in Camilla's handwriting. His pulse quickened as he opened the first one. The ink had bled with age, but her words were unmistakable.
I still remember your promise. To protect me, no matter what the Crown decides. You said the guards would never question it. I trust you more than anyone. Charles felt the world tilt slightly. His breath hitched. Langford stood silent. He didn't dare move. The king's eyes lingered on the last line. If he ever finds out, it will destroy everything. The room seemed to shrink around him. He set the letter down with trembling fingers. How long had this existed beneath his feet? How many years had Camilla come here, keeping secrets even after the coronation, after the vows, after all the speeches about forgiveness and unity? Charles's thoughts raced, through decades of royal image management, through late-night arguments that ended in silence, through every look in Camilla's eyes that seemed to carry something unsaid. He exhaled slowly. No one knows about this room. Not a word leaves here. Langford. Understood. Yes, Your Majesty. Seal the corridor when we leave, and have the rest of the guards stay away from this wing. Langford nodded, but his gaze lingered on the photo. The faintest look of confusion, or perhaps guilt, flashed across his face. Charles noticed. Is there something you're not telling me? Langford hesitated. Sir, Robert Haynes wasn't just any guard. He was captain before me. Some say he took the fall for someone else. For whom? Charles demanded. I don't know, Langford said softly, but his dismissal coincided with your marriage to Camilla. The silence that followed was heavier than stone. Charles turned back toward the letters, the air thick with dust and betrayal. His throat tightened as he lifted another envelope, sealed with wax and the faint imprint of a crown. He stared at it for a long time, then whispered to himself, What have you done, Camilla? Somewhere above, a clock chimed noon. The faint echoes of tourists outside the palace gates sounded impossibly far away, as if they belonged to another world, one untouched by secrets. In that underground room, Charles realized something chilling. Forgiveness, once broken, never rebuilds the same way. And this secret chamber was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning. When Camilla entered the royal apartments later that afternoon, she found Charles standing by the window, motionless, staring out at the palace gardens as if the air itself had betrayed him. The rain tapped softly against the glass, but the silence inside the room was far louder. Charles, she asked gently, her voice cautious, you've been up since dawn. Is something wrong? He turned slowly. His eyes weren't angry. They were hollow, heavy with something far worse. Where were you this morning? He asked quietly. Camilla hesitated. I was with the staff, reviewing the charity list for next week's dinner. Why? He studied her face. Every detail. The way her hands clasped together. The faint tremor in her voice. You wouldn't happen to know anything about a door hidden in the east corridor, would you? Her expression flickered, barely noticeable, but enough. A small, sharp breath. Then she smiled, trying to mask it. A door? In Buckingham? There are hundreds of doors, Charles. He didn't move. Not like this one. He walked closer, step by slow step, until the distance between them was only a few feet. A door behind a tapestry. A room beneath it, with your photograph on the desk. The color drained from Camilla's face. Her hands froze. Charles's voice deepened, carrying a weight that came from both betrayal and disbelief. You kept it. All of it. The letters, the photo, the box. You built an entire life beneath my feet. Camilla's lips parted, but no words came. For a long moment, the only sound was the rain. Finally, she whispered, you weren't meant to find that. Charles laughed bitterly. And yet I did. He turned away, moving toward the fireplace. You could have told me. After everything, the years, the scandals, the tears, the forgiveness, I thought there were no more lies left between us. Don't say lies, Camilla said softly. Not about this. That room it was a part of me long before I ever became queen. Then tell me, Charles said, his voice breaking slightly. Who was he? Robert Haynes, the guard in the photograph. Camilla closed her eyes. Her fingers tightened around her wedding ring. He was the only person who ever protected me when everything fell apart, when Diana's shadow was still everywhere, when I was hated for even breathing near you. Robert was assigned to me after the divorce. He became my friend. Friend, Charles repeated. That's all. Camilla's eyes glistened. Yes, but the world would never have believed that, and you know it. That room, those letters, they were moments when I tried to survive the noise, the shame, the headlines calling me the villain. She took a step closer. You of all people should understand what it means to live with ghosts. Charles turned his head slightly, his voice low. I understand ghosts, yes, but secrets? Secrets destroy kingdoms, Camilla. The door creaked open behind them. Langford stood at the threshold, hat in hand, his face pale. Your Majesty, forgive the intrusion, but there's something else you should see, he said quietly. Charles gestured for him to continue. Langford stepped forward and placed a sealed envelope on the table. We found this lodged behind the chest in the hidden room. It bears the signature of President Barack Obama. Camilla froze again. Charles's eyebrows knit in confusion. Obama? What on earth does he have to do with this? Langford stepped back. It's dated 2011, sir. Charles broke the seal. The letter was short, barely a few lines, written on White House stationery. Dear Duchess, thank you for keeping this between us. I understand your decision, and your trust will never be broken on my end. You did the right thing for your country and for your king, Barack H. Obama. Charles stared at it for a long time, speechless. The silence felt like it could crush the walls around them. He looked up at Camilla, his voice trembling. What decision? What did you do? Camilla turned away, gripping the back of a chair. It wasn't political, Charles. It was personal. Something that could have harmed the monarchy during your mother's final years. Charles's tone sharpened. Then tell me. Camilla exhaled shakily. Do you remember the scandal about the leaked phone transcripts? The ones everyone thought were fake? Charles frowned. You mean the old recordings? Tampongate? That nonsense was years ago. Camilla nodded slowly. It wasn't nonsense, Charles. The original tapes, there were more. Tapes that could have destroyed you before you ever took the throne. Someone in the American press had copies. Obama helped bury them. The room spun. Charles stepped back, the world tilting again beneath the weight of every word. You made that deal? Tears welled in Camilla's eyes. I didn't have a choice. I begged them not to release it. I would have done anything to protect you, even if it meant keeping that room, those letters, those memories hidden. Charles's voice cracked. At what cost? At the cost of myself, she said quietly. You think I wanted to live like this? With a room I couldn't speak of? Every time I walked past that corridor, I thought what I buried there, how many lies I told to keep us whole. For the first time, Charles saw her not as the queen consort, not as a partner who shared his throne, but as a woman carrying the unbearable weight of survival in a world that never forgave her. Still, pain twisted inside him. You could have told me. You should have. Camilla stepped forward, her voice trembling but strong. Would you have forgiven me if I had? He didn't answer. Outside, thunder rolled softly over London. The storm had reached the palace, shaking the window panes. Langford, still by the door, cleared his throat. Your Majesty, there's something else. The restoration team found another compartment in the hidden room. Charles turned, drained. Another? Yes, sir. A smaller chest, hidden beneath the floorboards. Inside it, there's a journal. The first page bears your mother's handwriting. For a moment, no one breathed. The Queen's! Charles whispered. My mother? Langford nodded slowly. It's addressed to you. Camilla's hand rose to her mouth. Oh, Charles. He took a deep breath, every emotion, shock, grief, rage, colliding at once. Bring it to me? Langford bowed and left quietly. When the door closed, Camilla reached for Charles's hand. Whatever she wrote, it won't change the past. But please, don't let this destroy us now. Charles didn't pull away, but he didn't return the gesture either. His voice was tired, his gaze distant. Some things don't destroy us, Camilla. They simply show us what was already broken. The lightning outside flared again, casting brief shadows over the walls. And in that fleeting flash, Camilla realized something. The real secret wasn't the room beneath the palace. It was a truth that forgiveness, once fractured, becomes a ghost that never stops haunting. The next morning, the palace corridors buzzed with quiet tension. Guards whispered. Advisors exchanged uneasy looks. Word had spread. Something had been discovered beneath Buckingham, something the king himself had ordered sealed. But no one knew the details. Only 3 people did. And all 3 carried the kind of silence that comes when truth becomes too dangerous to name. Charles sat at his desk, the Queen's old journal open before him. The cover was made of soft, cracked leather, the royal crest faded with age. The first line inside was written in his mother's familiar hand, neat, firm, unmistakable. To my son, Charles, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and what you have found was never meant to be unearthed. He swallowed hard and continued. I once told you that the crown is not inherited, it is carried. But I also knew the weight it placed upon your heart. There are things a monarch must never confess publicly, but must never deny privately. Camilla's past is one of them. Protect her, even when you doubt her. For the monarchy's survival may depend on your forgiveness more than your rule. Charles stopped reading. His hands trembled slightly. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. So she knew. His mother had known. About the room, perhaps even about the letters. And she kept it buried, not out of deceit but preservation. He leaned back, closed his eyes. Mother, you kept me in the dark to protect a secret I was already living. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Enter. Langford stepped in, carrying a seal file. Forgive the intrusion, sir. There's more you should see. The restoration team found several letters hidden within the Queen's journal binding. Charles nodded faintly. Set them down. Langford placed the envelope on the desk, hesitated, then added quietly, Sir, some of them bear Robert Haynes's signature. The king's eyes lifted slowly. You read them? No, your majesty, Langford said quickly. Only verified the handwriting. Charles waited until Langford exited, then opened the envelope. Inside were 4 letters, all aged but carefully preserved. The first was addressed to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. Your Majesty, I write not out of disloyalty, but out of conscience. I can no longer protect the Duchess of Cornwall in silence. What she asks of me places a crown in jeopardy. If I remain, I serve her. If I speak, I betray her. Either way, the monarchy suffers. I will accept dismissal to keep the peace. Captain Robert Haynes, Royal Guard. Charles let the letter fall from his hands. The truth sank in slowly. Haynes hadn't betrayed the family. He'd sacrificed his career to protect them. But protect them from what? He reached for the next page. This one bore Camilla's handwriting. But it wasn't a letter. It was a note. Torn rushed. Robert, they know. Burn everything. Do not come to me again. The words hit him like a strike of cold iron. A third letter followed, and signed, written in hurried script. The tapes are secured overseas. The Americans agreed. The rest must be destroyed from within. Tell the Queen it's done. Charles stared at it, the meaning dawning slowly. The hidden room wasn't just a retreat. It was a vault, a burial ground for evidence that could have brought down the crown decades earlier. And Camilla, she had orchestrated it all. He felt the sting of tears behind his eyes, but the anger burned hotter. Not because she'd acted alone, but because she'd carried that burden in silence while lying beside him all these years. He rose abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. Langford. The captain entered immediately. Sir, prepare a car. We're going to Windsor. Langford blinked. Now, sir? Yes, Charles said sharply. There's something I need to see in the archives. Within the hour, The convoy moved to the London Rain toward Windsor Castle. The mood inside the car was taut, heavy with unspoken questions. Langford sat opposite the king, occasionally glancing up from his folder. "If I may, sir, whatever's written in those letters, it happened long before your reign. Perhaps it's better left buried." Charles looked out the window, watching the gray blur of the countryside. "And yet here we are, still living the shadow of it. My mother chose silence. Camilla chose secrecy. Perhaps I must choose truth." When they arrived, the archivist, a frail man named Harold Kersey, met them at the gates, trembling slightly at the unexpected royal visit. "Your Majesty, I wasn't expecting. I need access to the 2011 correspondence archives." "Diplomatic section," Charles said curtly. Kersey nodded and led them through narrow halls lined with files, papers, and sealed envelopes that smelled faintly of dust and history. At last, he stopped before a small iron cabinet. "This one, sir. Restricted clearance. White House exchange material." Charles reached for the handle and opened it. Inside were copies of diplomatic notes between the British government and the Obama administration. Most were mundane, trade discussions, cultural events, but one folder stood out. Red label, marked classified, personal exchange, DOC and DOC. Langford frowned. "DOC, Duchess of Cornwall," Charles said softly. He opened it. Inside was a single-page memorandum typed on Downing Street stationery. "In accordance with Her Majesty's wishes, all personal material regarding the late Prince and the Duchess of Cornwall shall remain sealed indefinitely. The cooperation of the United States government is acknowledged and appreciated." Below, a handwritten note in black ink read, "Per discussion with President Obama, ensure media suppression continues through mutual channels. The crown must remain intact." Charles stared at the note, the truth now undeniable. His mother, Camilla, even the American president, each had played a part in concealing the past, not out of conspiracy, but out of fear. Fear that one man's private words and one woman's past affection could unravel centuries of monarchy. He turned to Langford, his voice quiet but firm. "It seems everyone lied to protect me." Langford's eyes lowered. "Perhaps, sir, they did it to protect the idea of you, the king they hoped you become." Charles said nothing. He simply folded the document and placed it back into the folder. When they returned to Buckingham that evening, Camilla was waiting in the drawing room, pale but composed. "You went to Windsor," she said softly. He nodded. "I did. And now you know everything." "I do." They stood there, facing each other, surrounded by portraits of monarchs who had survived wars, betrayals, revolutions, but few had survived love like this. Charles took a long breath. "Robert Haynes didn't betray you. He saved you, and you repaid him with silence." Camilla's eyes filled with tears. "He asked for it. He said his loyalty was to the crown, not to me. And you believe that absolved you?" "No," she whispered. "But I believe it would keep you safe." Charles's gaze softened, painfully, reluctantly. "And now I must decide whether that safety was worth the price of truth." She looked away, her voice barely audible. "Truth doesn't always save, Charles. Sometimes it only burns what's left." He turned toward the window, the city lights flickering beyond the palace gates. Then maybe it's time the crown felt the fire for once. Night fell over Buckingham like a slow exhale. The palace, bathed in soft amber light, seemed peaceful from the outside. Yet inside, behind those tall windows, the storm still raged. Charles stood alone in the music room. The fire crackled faintly, reflecting in the polished piano lid. He held his mother's journal in one hand and Camilla's letter in the other, two testaments to a lifetime of duty, love, and deception. The door opened quietly behind him. Camilla entered, wearing a long gray coat, her expression unreadable. "You didn't come to dinner," she said gently. "I wasn't hungry," he murmured, eyes still fixed on the fire. She hesitated, then stepped closer. "You've read everything now." "Yes." His voice was calm, almost eerily so. "I know about Robert, about the tapes, about Obama's letter, and about Mother's message." Camilla swallowed hard. "Then you know I never did it to hurt you." He turned, meeting her gaze. No, you did it because you thought I couldn't bear the truth. Silence filled the room. Not the empty kind, but heavy, alive with everything left unsaid between them. I carried that room with me for years, Camilla said finally. Every secret, every letter. I thought if I hid them well enough, the world would stop hating me. That you'd finally be free from my shadow. Charles's voice softened, but his eyes remained hard. You didn't need to hide to protect me. You only needed to trust me. Her lips trembled. And would you have trusted me back then? When every headline screamed my name like a curse? When the whole world still worshipped Diana? He didn't answer. The fire crackled again, sending a faint burst of sparks upward. The sound of rain began to drum against the window, steady and rhythmic, like the heartbeat of a story nearing its end. Camilla looked at the letters in his hand. You're angry, she said quietly. You have every right to be. But please, don't let anger be the last word between us. Charles exhaled, running a hand through his hair. Anger isn't the last word. Camilla, disappointment is. Her breath caught, a small, wounded sound that echoed softly through the room. Then what happens now? He glanced toward the window, where lightning flickered far off above the city skyline. Now we tell the truth, at least part of it. Camilla froze. Charles, no. I'm not talking about the letters or the tapes. Those will remain sealed. But I will not rule as a man who hides behind walls and whispers. He looked back at her, his expression resolute. I will make a statement about transparency, about legacy. The world will know this crown doesn't fear its own past. Tears glimmered in her eyes. And what will they think of me? They'll think what they've always thought, he said softly. But perhaps for once they'll understand me. There was a long pause. Then she whispered, and us? Charles hesitated. Us? He looked at her. The woman who had loved him through scandal and exile, who had endured decades of scrutiny for a love that was never meant to be public. Us will depend on whether forgiveness still means something. Camilla took a slow breath, stepping closer. Then let me say it, before you decide. I never wanted to be queen. I only wanted to stand beside you, even if the world never forgave me. Her voice broke. But I see now, I asked you to forgive what I never had the courage to confess. Charles's hand trembled. He set the letters down on the piano and looked into her eyes. And I see now that forgiveness isn't always an act of mercy. Sometimes it's an act of war, choosing to stay when every part of you wants to walk away. For a long time, neither of them moved. The clock ticked softly in the background, the kind of quiet rhythm that marks the moment history changes without making a sound. Finally, Charles stepped forward. He reached out, brushed her cheek gently, not in passion, but in weary affection. You've carried this burden long enough, he said quietly. But it's time the crown carried its share. Camilla's tears slipped silently down her face. And you, can you still love me, knowing all of it? He didn't answer right away. His gaze lingered on the fire, on the dancing reflections of their faces, in the flickering light. Then, with the faintest smile, one touched by sorrow, yet not devoid of warmth, he said, Love doesn't vanish, Camilla. It just learns to live with the truth. The room fell still. Moments later, Langford entered discreetly, bowing low. Your Majesty, the press office is ready for your message. Charles nodded. Thank you, Captain. Tell them I'll be there shortly. Langford hesitated, then added, Sir, if I may, the hidden room has been resealed. No records will remain. Charles's voice was firm. Leave it sealed, but not forgotten. When Langford left, Charles walked toward the window again. The storm had cleared. London glistened beneath the streetlights, the city unaware of the reckoning that had just taken place within its most guarded walls. Camilla moved beside him, her voice barely above a whisper. You think history will be kind to us? He smiled faintly, a tired smile, the kind worn by men who know they've seen too much. History isn't kind to anyone, Camilla, but perhaps it will at least be honest. She slipped her hand into his. He didn't pull away this time. For a moment there was peace, fragile, imperfect, but real. And as the two stood together in the pale glow of the palace lights, something shifted in the air, Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. A quiet acceptance that even monarchs bleed when secrets come to light. Outside, the bells of Westminster tolled midnight. Inside, King Charles closed the journal, extinguished the fire, and whispered softly, "Let the past rest." Camilla nodded, tears glinting in her eyes. "And let tomorrow begin." Epilogue, a whisper beyond the door. Weeks later, tourists wandered through Buckingham's reopened East Corridor. The tapestry of King George VI's coronation had been restored, bright and flawless. No sign of the door that once lay hidden behind it. But if you listened closely in the silence between footsteps, you could almost hear it, a faint creak, like a memory refusing to fade. And beneath that memory, buried deep within the palace walls, lay the final truth of the modern monarchy. Even crowns rust, but love, however flawed, endures.